Thanks for making time in your afternoon when energy is always dipping a little bit. So I will try to be as engaging as possible so that you don't find your head on your desk. I am an executive leadership coach and business strategist. I've been coaching for almost 20 years. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years with several businesses of different sizes, some with employees, some with too many employees, and now I'm back to being a solopreneur, which I like just fine. I have 5 different accreditations in professional coaching, including leadership development, group coaching, energy leadership, and certification as a positive psychology practitioner. So what you're going to see today will bring in a fair amount of the positive psychology, but tempered with the practical applications as we all try to figure out how to move forward from the interesting event that we endured last year that is still carrying on and probably will be for the next 18 to 24 to 36 months. So we've got a little bit of time left to put into place some of the practices I'm going to speak about. A little bit more about me. I live at about 8,500 feet in the central Rocky Mountains of Colorado, just outside of a small town of about 2,000 people, and I'm remote from that. Although I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and San Francisco. So I have the metropolitan background and have chosen the rural mountain life. So my passion really is living into a joy-filled creative experience of myself and the world and empowering others to do the same with whatever they've chosen as their modality of sustenance in the world. So that's business people. I primarily coach entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders because I believe that they are really the force for transformation that the world needs. So I'm going to take over the screen now and get started with my PowerPoint. Can everybody see that just fine? Is that good? Thumbs up? Okay, great. So the topic, the title that I was asked to speak on today is around resilience. Resilience in times of change and challenge, which is fairly appropriate still. Last year, as the global pandemic unfolded, I was hearing back from a lot of clients that they were uncertain as to what to do and how to do it and what was next and how they could prepare their teams for what was next. And in the midst of all of that, I had several clients that pulled back from their regular coaching because they were uncertain about their finances. And I began to realize that there were a lot of the tools that I used with clients that would be really useful for a broader population. So all of that said, in March of last year, I pulled together a number of master level coaches who were willing to donate their expertise at no cost. And we formed a group called Coaches That Care, which you see under my name here. And Coaches That Care delivered months worth of coaching support to whomever wanted to access it. And we were not for profit, funded solely with donations. Some coaches reduced their fees drastically, others donated their time. And out of the expertise that was gathered together, I thought, what is another way in which to get some of this valuable information and these tools to more people? So I decided to write a book. So I wrote a book called Infinite Journey. It's this orange book that you see behind me. And the subtitle of it is Creating Calm in Times of Chaos. So a lot of the material I'm going to share are some of the nuggets in the book. There are over 100 exercises that people can choose from as needed and as appropriate for their particular circumstances. And all of that is to say that it has now evolved into a complete rebranding of my coaching practice as creative leadership systems, because the way in which we need to move forward needs to be more creative than what we've been doing that got us here to where we are now. So creative leadership systems, you're going to see my little logo at the bottom of some of the slides. And I had very high hopes that the transition from websites would be complete by today. It is not. So there will be still linkage from Coaches That Care website to the information that I'm going to share today and to some of the resources that I hope you will take the opportunity to access for yourself. So what we're going to cover today are going to be some definitions, and I really want to encourage participation on your part. So take a minute, make sure you have pen and paper, something to write on, because I'm going to give you a couple of things to jot down for yourself, and also keep your pen and paper handy so that as questions pop up from the things that I share, you can write them down. Then at the end, we can have a little bit of live interaction. This format is, although I do a lot of Zoom calls, they're usually group calls where I get to see everybody, and not being able to see you guys is an interesting, an interesting iteration of this technology. So we're going to chat about how to enhance resilience, and also some of the character strengths that lead to success. A lot of the research that's been done in the last 10 years in the field of neuroscience and positive psychology has given really definitive guidance for what works, what doesn't work so well, and could just be kind of looked at as an ancillary tool, and then what doesn't work at all. So we're going to talk about some of the things that have been proven to make a significant difference in the capacity of an individual to handle the unknown, which is where resilience comes in handy. And then at the end, there'll be a little bit more homework is the word I know people are familiar with, but for me, it's really more about play, because I'm a big proponent of doing things that bring you joy and making sure you include joy in your experience every day, because it's in understanding that we are here to have a joyful experience that we can then transform occurrences that may be less than ideal into something that is valuable, that's a learning opportunity, and that allows us to be resilient. So the first thing I'd love for you to write down on your piece of paper that you have is how you define resilience. What does it mean to you when you hear that word? It's, in my opinion, it's a rather obtuse word, and it's been bandied around quite a bit recently as people talk about the resilience of their systems, the resilience of their business, the resilience of their family dynamics, social resilience, and national resilience. And I think internationally, we are seeing some of the lack of resilience that exists globally. And so it's an opportunity to get clear about what we mean when we use that word. So take a moment, I'll give you about 30 seconds to write down, when you hear the word resilience, what does it mean to you? How does it show up in your life? Or how do you feel yourself expressing it? Take a deep breath. Write down something brilliant. So one definition of resilience that is bandied about quite a bit is a cultural one, and it's that capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And that's largely how it's being thrown around today. It's actually a term which comes from usage in mechanical physics, which means the ability of a substance to spring back. So elasticity, flexibility, plasticity. And it's interesting because the Latin root of the word resilience, resilire, means to jump back or to recoil. And so it is more in that mechanical, functional definition that resilience comes from. A more esoteric definition would be the capacity to bend with the wind and go with the flow and bounce back from adversity, all of which sounds super dynamic. And often when you are facing challenges that are calling on your resilience, that's not the energy that you have intrinsically. So that's an interesting kind of colloquial definition for resilience. One of the definitions that I came across as I was doing some research for this, I liked a lot because it kind of builds upon itself. This is all one definition, but it speaks to the interaction of our neuroplasticity and our ability to keep that hormonal loop of dopamine and serotonin, which then feeds the prefrontal cortex for creative thinking, the ability to respond, absorb, and adapt to, as well as recover in the event of a disruption. Then that resilience in a structure, a system, or community that is expected to be able to deal with an extreme event with minimal damages and functionality. I'm going to minimize this screen for a second. There we go. And then after the event, being able to rapidly recover functionality, similar to or even better than the pre-event level. And it's that even better than that we're being challenged with right now, because I think one of the aspects of last year's global event is that it pointed out all of the areas of lack, the gaps in our systems, and the things that haven't been working well for folks. So if we're going to live into a really robust definition of the word resilience, we're going to have to look at how we can recover functionality even better than the way it was in 2019. So my definition of resilience, and I absolutely have to credit the life that I had as a child, the way I grew up, the way my parents instilled a real core of optimism and positivity in us as children. It is the ability to find joy and be at peace in any situation at any time. And I love this picture of two kids in a rainstorm going as deep as they can into a puddle. And no doubt that water is going into those boots, but they are thrilled to experience that. And this picture speaks to some of the attributes of resilience that we're going to get into in a minute, which are curiosity and courage, and the ability to step into the unknown with a spark of joy or real interest in a positive way. So as you think about these definitions that we've looked at, and you look at what you wrote down, take some time this weekend to share your definition with someone close to you, whether it's a workmate, an office mate, a housemate, someone in your family, a close friend, to start to compare how we're all viewing this term so that we can come together to create strategies and structure that does work, because we're all on the same page with what we're thinking about. This aspect of resilience really was brought forth last year as a more primal response loop to the crisis that emerged, was that fight, flight, freeze, and fold aspect of how humans have been hardwired to respond to crises. You know, first there's that resistance and that fighting, and then there's the fleeing from it because you just don't want to have anything to do with it. And then there's that just freezing in place because you can no longer find any place to go with your angst. And then folding, just collapsing within yourself, because the aspect of hope and change is not present. Being resilient starts to change that response into one of proactive, creative, hopeful activity. And if we can instill a more grounded sense of our capacity to do that, we start to change what happens as a result of any particular incident and move through it more rapidly and more positively. So part of being resilient is being open to learning, being open to the opportunity that is presented as one for growth, as opposed to being one for stopping yourself in your tracks, being able to take risks because you have a sense of being able to deal with the consequences of that risk. And that will speak more about the aspect of confidence and connectedness that contribute to that. And then being able to manage our way back from the setbacks into a sense of competency and normalcy. And that's where we're at right now, globally, socially, communally, and in many family structures as well. Last year was a very interesting year for most of us in one way or another. And it is our levels of personal resilience that have influenced how we look back on that, whether it was a good year, a great year, or a year we'd rather not think about anymore. So I want to make sure that you understand that although I've used this word positive a lot, being positive isn't pretending that everything's good. It's being able to see the good in everything. And I think the work of Viktor Frankl is one that I lean on and go back to often. He is the Holocaust survivor who wrote the really thin book of Man's Search for Meaning, and is an incredible example of how to find resiliency in the midst of the most horrific circumstances, because you're able to find the good in something. No matter how small it is, you look for that, you find it, and then you use that as a touchstone for how to move forward in the midst of a challenging situation. So there are probably 60 to 70 different traits that psychologists and practitioners have identified as traits that are owned by folks who have a high level of resilience. And what I'd like you to do now is to look at this. I pulled out 20 randomly, truly. And I like the graphic here because this is more of what last year felt like in the beginning to a lot of folks. Very disconnected, very chaotic. For many people, they are still in a state of personal chaos, financial chaos, business chaos. And so look at this list of 20 and pick out 3 attributes, 3 traits that you know you have and that you use on a regular basis when things are going sideways. So things going sideways could be anything from having funding go away, having a job change, having a fender bender in the midst of rush hour, having plans that get canceled or changed at the last minute, having a child who's insanely upset because their toy fell on the floor. So anything that is a potential for disruption in your life, what are the 3 traits that you find yourself breathing into and owning fully? So just pick 3 of them from here, whether it's the capacity to be calm in the midst of chaos, whether it's having humility in a work environment where you're able to ask for help, where you're able to bring in a team to support you in creating solutions for challenges that come up, whatever it might be. And after you write down those 3 things, one of the assignments that I'd like to give you is to find 3 examples over this weekend for each of those 3 traits, 3 concrete examples of how you have used that trait in the last 12 months or in the last 16 months. So in this last year, what did you call upon from within yourself? Write it down, because there's an aspect of self-acknowledgement that begins to literally rewire your brain to not only acknowledge that you have the capacity, but to strengthen that capacity. And so it's an aspect of what's called relational intelligence, which includes self-awareness and creating an inner security base that becomes that platform from which resilience springs for yourself. So it's about developing a healthy relationship with yourself. And what a lot of folks were challenged with last year was a bit of a gap in how they acknowledge their own capacities. And when you're in that state of confusion, sometimes you lose your capacity to be creative or your capacity to be flexible. And so if you can acknowledge for yourself where you use the 3 traits that you chose for yourself, you're going to go a long way towards strengthening whatever neural networks exist and building new ones that will come in to serve you the next time a challenge arises. So it's a small thing, but it's a very effective exercise that if you have teenagers or young children, I would encourage doing this with them as well, because it starts to build that sense of inner confidence that is often not built in any other way. And in our society of social comparisons, with social media, we're continually comparing ourselves to what else is out there. It can go a long way towards keeping you on track for moving in the direction that you choose versus one that's being marketed to you, if that makes sense. And of course, all of these traits of resilience, we get challenged in our lives in terms of how we're able to call upon them. And some of the challenges that face us are things like shame or guilt, that inner critic that says, well, yeah, you think you're really creative, but truthfully, you're really not all that hot. So that inner critic can be something that challenges our ability to call upon this trait. External expectations, whether they're social or societal or personal expectations that are a reflection of something we may have seen or taken in from the outside. All of those things can challenge our ability to access these assets and to keep these assets strong. So that exercise of finding 3 examples of how you have actually used them will go a long way towards allowing you to have access to them when you need them. One other exercise, which I'd love to give you right now, is to also look for acknowledgement of those traits from others. So trying to find some positive input to yourself. We often are very dismissive when someone says, wow, that's great, or good job, or thanks so much for holding the door for me. We often just kind of dismiss those acknowledgements as either unimportant, insignificant, or no big deal. And it's not that it's a big deal, it's a deal. It's, again, input that creates new circuitry in your brain for resilience. So what I'd love for you to do is to, again, take the weekend to notice the positive input each day. And in that noticing, also create an awareness around how you may be sharing acknowledgement to someone else for one of their traits of resilience that you notice. So noticing positive input each day, listing 3 things each day for a week, starts to literally create new neural patterns in your brain, which is pretty interesting. So, and it can be either noticing these traits, or it can be simply what's positive in the world for you right now. Right now, the rain has just started here in Colorado. I have a metal roof, and so I hear the raindrops. And to me, that's incredible, because we have such a high fire danger, typically starting in June, that to get more moisture, to get more rain is quite a blessing. And it's something that's positive in my life. Hearing birds sing, having someone smile at you, having laughter to share with someone. So all of those things are positive. They're inputs that we tend to minimize in terms of acknowledging them. So I'm going to task you with finding 3 positive inputs every day. Some of these same traits are expanded for leadership. And since I can't really see who you are or where you're from, and I'm not familiar with most of you, I don't know what your roles are in terms of leadership. And leadership dynamics is one of the specialties that I have. And that leadership dynamics speaks to how we lead ourselves through life, but also how we work with teams and how we work with organizations. So these are 9 different core disciplines that have developmental aspects to them, that have exercises that can increase your understanding of them, and that I work with clients weekly on increasing their capacity to access these disciplines and use them in an ongoing manner. And I want to share a little bit of some synonyms for these, because some of these are a little more clinical when it comes down to how they're defined, but awareness speaks to a leader's curiosity about what's going on around them. So that curiosity around what's working, around the impact on individuals around you. And this is why it's also about leading yourself. So having awareness of your environmental input, on relational input, and on energetic input is a core discipline. Acceptance, acknowledging what is, that capacity to say, okay, this is the truth of the circumstances right now. only from that place can you move forward. And that aspect of denial that went on for a very long time last year really slowed down the ability for us to progress back to a healthy functioning society. So acceptance is a true leadership dynamic that's worth taking a look at your level of it and how you can close the gap if it's not something that you're very strong in. Connection to place, to yourself, to others, to spirit, to whatever it is that inspires. Things like courage, which is that ability to push into discomfort and push into the unknown with a sense of confidence that you have the capacity to manage whatever shows up. And then, of course, clarity, which is about, moving into understanding of what the goals are and what the longer term vision may be, while also being present in the moment. So that dynamic of having clarity, in my book, I link clarity to values and understanding what your core values are, how they're showing up for you, and how you're honoring them always in terms of the choices that you make in life and in business. And it's always interesting to me how little work individuals may do around value clarification, because it's the core of how we move through life. And then mindfulness is one that I have here because it has come to me from clients unsolicited several times this year. I have a young man in Manhattan who runs an IT company that he founded after he graduated from MIT. And he called me a couple of months ago to say, I think I want to learn more about mindfulness and how I can use that as a tool to connect with my employees. His company just expanded to 80 employees, and he's trying to figure out how to understand the different backgrounds and the different talents and the different moods, truly, of the personalities under his care right now. So that was interesting. Mindfulness has come up several times from C-suite individuals that I would not have assumed it to come from. So these are some of the top resilience skills that, although you chose 3 traits for yourself, these are 6, I think there's 6 of them here that have been identified as some of the top traits to have: self-awareness, an understanding of self, purpose. Having a purpose is key to owning resilience, and that there are several studies that are out there that connect purpose to being resilient, having something larger than yourself to focus on and to know that you're moving towards as you're navigating the ins and outs of any particular challenge. Adaptability, positive relationships, optimism, and there's mindfulness again. And I wanted to share the definition of mindfulness as it was given by John Kabat-Zinn, who was the MIT student who really forged forward in the late 1970s to bring mindfulness and some of the teachings of Eastern philosophies to the West. And his definition of mindfulness is the one I think I like the best of all the ones that I've seen. And it is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And as I've worked with groups in the last 6 months, it's that non-judgmentally piece that is the biggest learning zone for most of the leaders that I've worked with, is how to be present, how to pay attention on purpose, non-judgmentally. So that's just an interesting aside, if you will. So the cool thing about resilience is that it is recoverable. If you had been resilient at one time in your life when you were younger and you have that capacity to remember running through puddles and just being in joy, even as it was thundering and raining all around you, it is recoverable. It's learnable. If you don't think you've ever had that skill set of resilience, it is something that can be learned, and it's able to be strengthened. So that aspect of looking at where you're at and knowing that you can move to another stronger, deeper, more grounded level of it is really encouraging in many ways. And, you know, lest we think that these soft skills are really not applicable to a business group. There were several studies that came up just in the last month. One is from the Yale School of Management. One was from the MIT Executive Education Department that talked to how leaders are being asked to have higher levels of what they're calling emotional intelligence. And that there's a need for all organizations to pay closer attention to the people side of their operations. And all of those traits and qualities and characteristics that we've just listed and gone through are part of what are termed soft skills. But a recent LinkedIn survey had almost 40% of their respondents place emotional intelligence at the very top of their skills requirement list, which I thought was fascinating to have that larger percentage having it not only as a desired skill, but at the top of the list, because I think we're seeing that there is an aspect of how we all function in the world that cannot be separated from the fact that we are humans at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, and all through the day. We are emotional beings on this quest to bring good into the world, to provide services, to provide goods, but it's to provide them to other people. And so having that capacity to have a high IQ in that intelligence quota area is a huge asset skill to develop for yourself and for those that you connect with, both at home and at work. So we talked about how this is recoverable and it's buildable and you can, you know, create more of it for yourself. If you're just an individual on the webinar today, you can commit to active development of gratitude, awe, and self-care. So that gratitude, having appreciation for what does exist. And here we are in the first world country designation. We have a ton of things to be grateful for, to be in awe of the natural world and the things that are around us. Things like the rain that I'm hearing outside. I'm in awe of how it changes the landscape from brown to green here in the mountains. And then self-care practices. I've actually done several self-care webinars this spring as groups began to realize that as they were wrestling with how to reorganize and restructure, they also needed to take a look at how people were handling the stress of it all. So self-care practices can be as simple as taking a deep breath, smiling at one another. The thing that I love about doing Zoom calls, and I've done hundreds of them, as many of us have, is that I love to look around and see who is engaged on that level of enjoyment. Because I'm a huge proponent of if you don't enjoy something, don't do it. Find those things that bring you joy, that let you smile, that let you laugh. Because those aspects of smiling and laughing also cause that hormonal release of dopamine, which then impacts the prefrontal cortex, which is the center for creative thinking. So if you want to do better with finding solutions to the problems in your world, smile and laugh more. And for individuals and teams, all of the above applies, but also engage in values clarification exercises, which is something I've done with groups a lot as well this year, which means to have each individual member of a team identify values, not just the company values and mission statement, but to see where everyone is at and review and revise these on a regular basis. Because the things that we value at any given phase of our life and our work and our personal development can shift and change over time. Our core values generally remain the same, but the order and priorities of them can shift. And compare and contrast who values what, so that appropriate interactions can be devised and the strengths of a team can truly be brought forward. And then identify signature strengths. There are 24 signature strengths that have been found to exist worldwide across all demographics and all cultures. And these signature strengths are simply assets that we can tap into for ourselves in terms of how we interact with the world. And again, those signature strengths can shift and move, But for a team to look at the top 5 strengths that any particular group individual may have and see where the gaps are and who is strong in a particular area allows for designation and delegation of tasks appropriately. So that's one thing that allows people to be honored for their skill sets, for what is inherently natural for somebody to do. And in that acknowledgement comes the aspect of self-care and resilience. And of course, here I am in Colorado listening to the rain on my roof, and it would be remiss of me not to share that the ultimate resource for building resilience is nature. This is what I look at outside my window every day. And in between every call, I step outside and breathe in that fresh air. So Mary Reynolds Thompson wrote a book called Reconnecting with the Wild Soul. Her subtitle is How Earth's Landscapes Restore Us to Wholeness. And in my book, in my self-care section, one of the recommendations that I make to folks is to find a way to connect with the earth, grounding. I mean, literally to ground yourself out. And in her book, she talks about seeing beyond the brokenness of the world into something more enduring, more resilient, and infinitely more lovely. And I just like that quote enormously. The work that I do with clients and that I wrote about in the book is around a 3-step process, which is interconnected and revolves starting with curiosity and wondering what else is possible in the midst of any circumstance, and having that desire to know and an interest in inquiring about what else is possible in order to achieve clarity around what steps might be most appropriate, what's going to be most effective. And then after achieving that level of clarity, which is always connected to those values exercises, having the courage or the confidence to act in accordance with those values and with those beliefs. And having courage to step into action often brings more curiosity about, okay, if this didn't work, what else might work better? So it's a interconnected loop that goes around and around. And in the book that I wrote, I've got over 100 exercises that will take you through how to explore each of these concepts in a way that actually brings you more skill in doing that. And having these skills of being able to be curious, being able to achieve clarity for oneself in the midst of chaos, and then having courage to step into what will work for you is what stepping into resilience looks like. In the book, I have these bubbles that connect each concept to what you will achieve by it. So with courage requires a certain level of commitment, a level of resolve and dedication to whatever the issue is, and an attentiveness to the issue. So that's the clarity piece. It requires boldness. It builds confidence. It can seem daring, but at the end of the day, the hope piece is that energetic fuel for all of the other qualities, and hope gets built when we're courageous. So this is just a little aside that I threw in. This is something that I put together for everybody who's on the webinar. And if you go to the coachesthatcare.org website, there's a little tab at the top that is a resilience resource page. And if you fill in the form there, I will send you, here are some of the books that I've used to just pull some information for this presentation. And there's my book in there as well. But what you will receive is a complete list of that resilience traits list that I only had 20 of. You'll get the whole list, plus several exercises on how to explore them, how to play with them, how to have fun with them. And I would hope that you would share that list with whoever's in your family, whoever's in your home, whoever's in your office, because it absolutely will bring attention to those things that start to become assets for when challenges pop up. You'll also receive a book list with synopsis of what the book is about. some of the ones that were in that former picture, but also a couple of others that are really valuable for supporting your exploration of how to build resilience for yourself. And I will also give you a link to a free signature strengths assessment, which will give you the rankings and an explanation on where your 24 signature strengths lie, along with a link to a video about them. And for whoever is interested, a complimentary 30-minute discovery and debrief session where we can talk about what you find out about yourself, or answer any questions about what next steps might be most valuable for whatever your scenario is. So that's kind of my gift to everybody who made time for today. So, of course, I have to end with more photos of where I live and a quote from Paul Hawken, who was an incredible change agent from the 80s onward and he said, leave enough time in your life to do something that makes you happy, satisfied, and joyful. Sustainability, ensuring the future of life on Earth, is an infinite game, and it is. So this blip of time that we've been experiencing for the last 16 months is simply part of the journey. And we're all getting ready to step into the next path on our journeys. And if we can do so well equipped with resilience traits, it should be a pretty fun exploratory experience. So that said, I want to say thank you. And these are some ways that you can get a hold of me. If you use that phone number, please text first, because we don't answer any strange unknown numbers, of which there are dozens that seem to be coming in these days. They go in waves, but text first, and then we'll know to pick up your call. You can reach me at coachesthatcare@gmail.com, and you'll see more information on the website. And just know that that is all going to be transitioning to the Creative Leadership Systems website in about 2 weeks. It'll still be active. So either way, this information will remain good for quite a while. So this has been fun. It's been fun. There's so much more that I could share. And yet, we didn't really get into what gets in the way, some of the major stressors that are present for everyone, that these traits of resiliency help us to meet successfully. And I do have a 90-minute mindset mastery workshop that I've delivered quite a bit this year, as you might imagine, that when teams have gone through it, they've all seen huge success for themselves as corporate entities in terms of moving forward with their businesses instead of having them collapse. So this material absolutely adds value to the capacity to be successful in whatever it is you're doing. So that's the whole show right now. Let me get out of sharing the screen.
Thank you, Dr. Forsyth.
You're welcome.
Do you mind sharing that PowerPoint with me that I can add as a link?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, I'll add it we'll do a follow-up email to everyone and I'll include it.
Sounds
awesome.
Good.
Does anyone have any questions? Awesome. Great.
Awesome.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I want to, oh, Jennifer's back on. Let's see if I can allow her to talk. Jennifer, are you there?
Her name is there.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe
nope,
not.
She's gone.
Oh, sorry, did not mean to do that. Oh, she jumped off again. Yeah, she must be having connectivity issues.
Sure.
All right, well, I just want to thank everybody on behalf of Raise the Bar Consulting. I do want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Our next session will be Thursday, June 17th at 2 p.m. Pacific time again. We will be hearing from Brian Wood, owner of Mars Coaching, and he'll be speaking about the mindset of leadership through his experiences. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that. And again, thank you. This whole Upping Your Game series is sponsored by Raise the Bar Consulting, where they specialize in comprehensive fundraising, organizational alignment, transitional leadership, and interim executive solutions. So if you'd like any more information about the consulting firm, you can find us at raisethebarllc.com. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Moira Forsyth.
You're welcome. Yep.
And yeah, that's all. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Absolutely. Have fun. And